After 6 long years, the next 3D Zelda is finally upon us. Now, I've been playing Zelda for close to 20 years, so I think I know a thing or two about... Wait. I've been waiting for this game for over a quarter of my fandom? Oh, Now, shocking news, everyone. Breath of the Wild is a good game. I think you've seen a couple of review scores out there already by now. It's really good. But is it a great game? Is it a 10 out of 10? Is it 5 stars? Does it stand among its Zelda brethren at the top tier of video gaming as a whole? Well, let's find out. Disclaimer, I am basing this review on one playthrough of the main game. I've spent a grand total of about 30 hours with it so far, and focused on the main quest. I will be returning to the game in the coming days to complete more of the side quests, shrines, and all the other stuff this massive world has to offer. Yes, friends, this game is massive. I'm sure I've missed a couple of things in my one and only playthrough of the game. So if I say something you believe is incorrect in this review, please politely point it out in the comments below. Thanks, everybody. So let's start on a positive note, shall we? What did Breath of the Wild do right? Number 1, freedom. Breath of the Wild harkens back to the freedom of the original Zelda more than any other game in the franchise. The sense of freedom right from the opening minutes of the game is certainly a departure from the established 3D Zelda formula. There is no long opening cutscene. There is no small town that you walk around, talk to people, and get asked to do a bunch of boring tutorials. In Breath of the Wild, you wake up from your sleep and you're off. While the plateau segment of the game does act as a tutorial of sorts, it never approaches the heavy-handed opening hours of Twilight Princess or Skyward Sword. When you're rewarded the paraglider and can leave the plateau, the entire massive world becomes completely free to explore. Nothing, and I mean nothing, is blocked off. Not even the final boss of the game. Number 2. Art direction and overworld design. Zelda games have always been beautiful, but Aonuma and team really went all out with the first, built from the ground up, HD Zelda title. The overworld is literally concept art brought to life. It feels like no compromises had to be made due to hardware. The entire world is open to explore with no load times and no annoying graphic issues, at least that I ever noticed. I almost never do this, but I found myself just standing around, taking pictures or just admiring some of the environments in the game. While my imagination had to fill in the blanks when I played Zelda on the Super Nintendo or the N64, that's no longer necessary with Breath of the Wild. Number 3, difficulty and combat. This game completely kicked my ass. I have no doubt that this is the hardest Zelda game of all time. The Dark Souls influence is evident here. Bosses no longer take 3 hits to slay, but instead sport a massive health bar that you must slowly chip down. Mashing will get you absolutely nowhere in this game. Most enemies will either dodge your attacks or shield and punish you. Mastering combat techniques like parries is essential, with some enemies requiring you to parry their blindingly fast attacks in order to score any offense at all. Finally, and this reminded me of Dark Souls the most, from the start of the game to the finish, you will encounter enemies that will one-shot you if you're not careful, regardless of the armor you're wearing or the buffs you have equipped or anything else you do to your character. I've never seen so many game over screens while playing a Zelda title. Number 4, weapon variety. One of my favorite things about the N64 Zelda titles was all the different weapons you could obtain. The Razor Sword, the Gilded Sword, Bigoron Sword. It was always so cool to find various weapons outside of the usual Starter Sword and Master Sword. Well, Breath of the Wild certainly doesn't disappoint in that regard. There must be hundreds of different weapons in the game, from swords to shields to bows. These are the things I always wanted to find in a cave in a hidden treasure chest. Not blue rupees. Number 5, shrines. The shrines are a neat way to encourage players to explore the map. Each shrine consists of anything from 1 to maybe 5 or even more puzzles that you have to solve. Traditionally, these puzzles would be reserved for the game's standard dungeons, but instead, Breath of the Wild has them peppered across the entire map. Now, while I'm sure this sentiment's already been shared, these shrines really reminded me of the levels in Portal, except you're solving Zelda puzzles instead. And that is pretty cool. Now, I'm sure you've all heard stuff like that already. If you've read any reviews or watched any other video reviews or read Reddit or NeoGAF or any other gaming website, you've heard a lot of those compliments for the game. But, you know, I haven't seen much criticism of the game, which honestly kind of surprised me because I noticed all of this stuff during my playthrough before any of the reviews were out, claiming Breath of the Wild is the greatest game known to mankind. This game's not perfect. It's not perfect. And I'm gonna get into that right now. So let's hit up some of the cons in Breath of the Wild. Number 1, music. Friends, this one hurts me more than it hurts you. Don't get me wrong, there is some nice sounding music in Breath of the Wild, but I expect so much more from a Zelda game. The truth is, I don't think there was a single new tune in the entire game that had a hummable melody that was stuck in my head after playing it. In fact, a lot of the time you're traversing the overworld to complete silence. That's not what I like in my Zelda games. Of course, whether music is good or not is very subjective. But I want you to listen to this comparison. I want you to listen to this music from The Lost Woods in Ocarina of Time. Now, here's the music playing from The Lost Woods in Breath of the Wild. I'm going to play it for 30 seconds, so if you want to skip ahead to not be spoiled, go right ahead right now. One's a classic, one's forgettable. I rest my case.
I was thinking, this reminds me of the time we first met. You were just a reckless child, always getting yourself hurt at every turn. Every time, I would heal you, just as I'm doing right now.
I bet it would suck if I did this entire video with a weird monotone voice. Or if I said everything with a blatantly fake English accent. We all wanted voice acting in our Zelda, and we got it. And it wasn't good. At all. The actors deliver their lines with such wooden delivery that it almost brought me back to playing Resident Evil on the PlayStation.
Stop it! Don't open that door!
Why couldn't they get the team behind the voice acting in Kid Icarus Uprising on this game, Nintendo, please? Number 3, weapon durability. This was a constant annoyance during the entire playthrough of the game for me. While I'm open to change, I do feel like there's a nice balance to be struck with mechanics like this. Dark Souls also had a weapon durability mechanic, but it never felt like it got in the way of the fun of the game, and even when the weapon was about to break, you can use an item to fix it. As far as I've seen, no such item exists in Breath of the Wild. Furthermore, items, including your swords, shields, and bows, are rarely durable enough to last more than just a couple of battles. I found myself using up 3 or 4 swords and at least 1 shield and bow per boss battle in the game. These weapons disintegrate like nothing. While you're constantly picking up new weapons from chests or enemies, the most unforgivable sin committed by this game was giving low durability even on special weapons given to you by important characters in the game. There were a couple of instances where my sword was destroyed while fighting an enemy, and my only option was to finish him off with the weapons I had that had a 4th or even less attack power. There's a fine line between challenging and tedious, and I do think the weapon durability in this game leans more towards the tedious side. Number 4, boss designs. I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but the main dungeon bosses are easily some of the worst and most lazily designed bosses in all of Zelda. And that's really disappointing because I thought even Skyward Sword, Twilight Princess, as much as I was disappointed with those games, I thought they knocked it out of the park with some of their boss designs and boss battles. Unfortunately, not the case here, and that's, like I said, very disappointing. Number 5, shrines and dungeon designs. Wait a minute, didn't I like the shrines? Well, yeah, I did, but they're not perfect. As far as I can tell, every shrine in the game shares the exact same aesthetic style and the exact same music. It can get pretty tiresome after a while, especially when you're stuck on a puzzle for half an hour. I haven't really talked about the dungeons in the game in this video so far because there's really not much to say. They're not bad, but they're not great either. They're just kind of there. Sadly, all 4 dungeons also share the same aesthetic style, making them some of the dullest to look at in all of the 3D Zelda games. There's no shortage of great puzzles and challenges in Breath of the Wild, but I do think it's a bit of a missed opportunity to have so many puzzles used for shrines when they probably could have been spun out into their own additional dungeons for the main story. It's unfortunate that so many of the indoor areas you spend a lot of time in Breath of the Wild feel so samey, in a franchise that has traditionally been amazing at differentiating each location and each dungeon. Number 6, traversing the overworld. As grand and wonderful as the overworld is, Link's walking speed in this game is simply way too slow. Where's the bunny hood or the Goron mask when you need it? Time after time, I found myself running, draining stamina, running again, draining stamina, again and again and again, in open, empty fields. This would sometimes go on for minutes without enemies, NPCs, towns, or really anything to engage with. As much as I love the world and how it looks, there's some points where it seems big and empty just for the sake of being big and empty. The horse rental system is also overly complicated and completely unnecessary. Stables appear on the map every so often. You could grab a horse there whenever you need one. But if there's no stable or any wild animals that you can mount, you're shit out of luck and making the trek by foot. You can try to whistle for your horse, which even has its own dedicated button, but it's very easy to end up so far away from your horse that it can't hear you whistle. In every other 3D Zelda, mind you, these games had overworlds that were less than 1% as large as Breath of the Wild's overworld. In those games, your noble steed was usually just an ocarina song away, no matter how far you are on the map. For whatever reason, they've made it way harder to get a horse, and way easier to lose a horse in by far the biggest Zelda game ever made. It just doesn't make much sense to me. In the end, I ended up gliding, running, and warping much more than horseback riding. Number 7, lack of memorable moments. Remember this? Or this? These are all awesome, memorable moments. Maybe I'm just getting old, but I just finished the game and there wasn't a single moment like that. Nothing really stays with you after playing this game. Nothing stands out. It's a very by-the-numbers story with by-the-numbers cutscenes, by-the-numbers dialogue, by-the-numbers dungeons, characters, and by-the-numbers moments. Now, despite all of those issues, Breath of the Wild is still an absolute joy to play through. Aonuma and his team have successfully brought Hyrule into HD, and it is glorious to behold. The 3D Zelda formula has undergone some massive changes, and while they may have gone too far in a few places for my liking, overall they're very welcome and have successfully modernized the series. It is very easy to get lost in this massive, beautiful world, and I look forward to doing so again and again and again, even if the music is not so great. I give The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild an 8 out of 10. Okay, now I know what you're all thinking, but before you crucify me, please understand that an 8 out of 10 is a great score. However, Breath of the Wild does have some flaws, and the things it does well just aren't done well enough for me to hit that 9 or 10 score. It's certainly not at the level of Majora's Mask, Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, or even Link Between Worlds. So for fun, here's how I'd rank the 3D Zeldas at this time. Enough about me, what did you think of Breath of the Wild? How do you rank it among the other Zelda games? Leave a comment below, like, subscribe, and all that good stuff if you want to see more great Breath of the Wild videos. I'd love to respond to some of your comments and feedback in a follow-up video. Until then, take care, enjoy the Switch, and enjoy The Legend of Zelda.